Hey everybody, Beth Helvey with Couture Real Estate. I hope you're doing good today. It is Tuesday, September 29th. Can you believe October is going to be in just a couple days? It seems like it's been super slow and super fast all at the same time. I really don't know. So what we're going to talk about today is acceptance dates. This is something that I get asked a lot. So I have an as-is contract here, and it's going to be backwards. But at the bottom of the contract here is the acceptance date. Now, it's not most of the time what people are paying attention to is the closing date, which is right underneath of it, which is when is the contract going to close. But there's a reason you want to pay attention to this acceptance date. What this says is that if this offer that the buyer submits to the seller is not accepted by that time frame, whatever that time frame is on there, and you could put a date as well as a time, for example, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock p.m., whatever, then it is automatically withdrawn. Now, some reality with this. Typically, as a buyer agent, what I will do is I will call the listing agent and say, listen, you know by my questions that we've asked that we're going to put an offer in. Is there anything I need to know to make sure that the sellers have time to see this? For example, are they not tech savvy? Are they out of the country? Do you need to present this in person? Are there more than one seller? Because if you go into the tax record and you see 3 or 4 names on it, then you've got a lot of people to talk to. When you're purchasing a property that is in an estate situation, sometimes you're speaking to one person, sometimes you're speaking to all of the heirs. So you need to find out what the situation is and what that seller needs in order to respond appropriately. Now, granted, you know, if the seller comes back and says, hey, I can't answer your question by then, or if a listing agent says, but you don't want to start off by saying, hey, listen, I'm submitting this offer to you at 12 o'clock on Tuesday and I expect a response by 5 o'clock on Tuesday. You don't want to start off on the wrong foot that way, because this is basically your entry in the door. Okay, it's your first impression. And there's a reason that there is a end date on this. For example, you write an offer. Seller doesn't accept it, seller counters, seller ignores it. And then the acceptance date comes and goes. Seller then realizes that they screwed up and this is the best they're going to get. And they go ahead and sign everything and send it back thinking they're under contract. They're not. Because what this does is it protects the buyer from that happening. Okay? So when you send off a contract, if the seller agrees to everything, doesn't change anything at all, signs it all, sends it back, you're under contract. If seller changes anything at all on this, you know, even closing date, and I'm not talking just the amount, closing date, amount in escrow, who pays title, any of the addendums, anything, we're still in negotiation and nothing is solid yet, okay? The reason that that's important is because we don't want to put buyer in a situation where a seller has second thoughts and send this back and then puts buyer under contract when buyer really didn't want to be under contract. Perhaps they found something else. Perhaps they changed their criteria. Perhaps they changed their mind. And by having a closure on this, then you do know that buyer is not locked in without, you know, that certain time frame going on. So now things will happen. Sometimes a seller will call you, or the listing agent rather will call you and say, listen, they're thinking it over. They've got to talk to their children or their parents or something. We'll get back to you in the morning. And that date is come and gone. If seller then sends it back, whether signed or not, buyer can still be in this. If buyer chooses to counter or accept, you still can. It doesn't mean that buyer can't. It just protects buyer from getting locked into something that they've moved on away from. Now, sellers, it is important that if you want to lock in your buyer, you respond by that date. That's really important. So it's really important that your listing agent, if you are going to have an issue responding in a timely fashion, puts that in your listing in the realtor remarks. I do that. I actually have had listings where I had to talk to 4 siblings, or I had to talk to 2 siblings, one in the Northeast and one in the Southwest. Or I have a seller who is not tech savvy, which means I'm either emailing and then they have to print out, sign, and get back to me, or I'm going there personally to deliver this to them. So if it's one of those situations where I know it's going to be more than overnight, the next day, whatever, I will put that in the remarks to warn the buyer's agent. Okay, because the timing of this is something that's important. So, like I said, if for some reason you miss that date and the seller responds back, miss it by a few hours or whatever, the seller responds back, then, and the buyer accepts it or counters, as long as both parties are in agreement as to what is going on, you're still in play. Okay, and the other part about this is that counter offers are to be accepted or countered within 2 days of the original counter offer, unless otherwise specified. There is a place in the contract where you can say other party must respond by a certain amount of time, but the default in the contract is 2 days. So technically speaking, you can go back and forth for several days if you want to. But having this time frame in there protects the buyer, it protects the seller too, because let's face it, if seller is going back and forth with somebody and another offer comes in and it's really, really good and they want to sign off on it and accept it, they can do that. And then they have to notify the other buyer in writing that they are no longer in play and they've accepted another offer. So what this does is it also keeps people from accepting more than one offer, which can happen. And it also keeps buyers from getting locked into more than one property if there's, if they get rejected and then go on to something else. So it's a really kind of oversimplified version. But it's really there to keep the contract from extending forever into the future without having an end date to when things must be decided. Okay. So if you have any questions on this is really kind of a simple thing, but it's come up quite a few times lately. Hey, Jason. Hey, Daryl. Let me know. Throw it in the comments. Hey, Dave. Or send me a DM. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. But that is one of the time frames that we need to track and be aware of on the contract, because this is one of the first things that you're going to be looking at in a contract. And then people kind of forget about it once they get into the nitty-gritty and details of the other stuff. So if you have any questions, throw it in the comments or send me a DM. I'm happy to answer them. If you have any questions about real estate in general, throw it in the comments or send me a DM. I'm happy to answer them. I hope you all have a great day. It is a little warm today, but we're getting a cold front. And a cold front for our time for September for Florida means that we're going to be like 80, 81, 82 during the day and in the 60s at night. And then it's going to get warm again. So for those of us that live here, yes, we'll have a jacket. You'll be able to recognize the Sarasotans. And then the rest of everybody else is going to actually be comfortable. So I hope you all have a great day. If you can get outside and get some vitamin D, I encourage you to do so. Drink plenty of water and wear your sunscreen. And I will talk to you later. Bye, everybody.